Hello and welcome to Empathy in Motion, the power of employee volunteering. My name is Chris Jarvis, I'm with Realized Worth, and today we're going to answer the question, was it all worth it? Measuring impact. Except, that's probably the wrong question. Was it all worth it is a question that you want to ask when you're thinking through, was it worth it to the community? Was it worth it to the employee? Is it worth it for the company? But measuring impact is a slightly more complex idea. So let's look at it in its totality, and then we'll zero in on this particular question, was this even worth it? First, we're going to look at an overview of 4 factors. The 4 factors pretty much include every element of employee volunteering programs. We're going to explain what they are and how you use them. And then we're going to look at the logic model. This is where we get to the results of the program. Okay, so the 4 factors. As you'll notice on the screen, there are 4 quadrants. The capacity of the program, the competency of leadership, engagement of the individual, and the results of the program. Let's look at these one by one, break them down, and see how they apply. First, the capacity of the program. This is the structure and process of the program. And basically, you're asking some simple questions here. Will our program achieve scale? Meaning, can we offer everyone an opportunity to get involved in the community on a regular basis? Do we have the systems, structure, processes, and resources to support that? Can we enable measurement of outcomes and impacts? In the end, we're going to ask what those may be, but would we have a way to even understand if they were happening in the first place? Third, can we sustainably mobilize employee leaders? I mean, on an ongoing basis, once a quarter, around the world, across our country? Is it possible to do this? Does our program have the capacity? And finally, can we provide focus while still including employees? There's been a huge trend to get focused in on an employee volunteering program. We're all about water, or we're all about STEM education. And that's good because it enables companies to tell a compelling story that's understandable in a tweet, which is important. The problem is you tend to disenfranchise a whole employee base that has a whole lot of existing interests or even connections in the community. How do you have a process that can include both? These are capacity issues that have to be addressed, and we have to ask these questions, can our program do this? Next, we have to look at the competency of the leadership. We're making some assumptions here that you're mobilizing employees to actually lead other employees, their peers, their colleagues, in communities where they live and work to take action. So the question we need to ask is, are employee volunteer leaders able to, 1, find an organization with which to work, and scope a project? This is a complicated process which, broken down in steps, can easily be achieved, but it does take some programming and some timing and some training. Can your employee leaders do this? Second, once there, are they able to manage the event correctly so that it is transformative and not only transactional? Can they frame the event by setting expectations? And can they facilitate critical reflection through the brief at the end? Finally, can they meet volunteers at their highest level of contribution at the event? Do they understand that employees may be at stage 1, 2, or 3? And once they figure that out with the right series of questions, do they know how to utilize them in a way that benefits them, the company, and the community? Next, we want to know how engaging is the event itself for the individuals who are participating. Led by their peers to work in the community at a nonprofit, was the event itself engaging? We use something called, or an adaptation of something called, the Net Promoter Score. It was developed by Bain & Company, and it runs on a scale of 1 to 10. It's not rocket science or anything, but it does provide a pretty interesting insight as to the level of engagement of an individual at an event. On a scale of 1 to 10, we would say, for example, how likely are you to talk to a friend, a colleague, a neighbor, or a relative about your experience today? Remember, for us, engagement is positive action, they went to the event, and then sharing the experience with someone else. That means they're engaged. If it's worth enough to tell someone about, it's engaging. If they say 9 to 10, 9 or 10, they're a promoter, a loyal enthusiast. If they're 7 or 8, they're passive, meaning they had an okay time, but if something else came up, they might be distracted. If they're 1 to 6, they're likely a detractor, and they may say something negative about the event. It wasn't well run, I didn't have anything to do, whatever it may be. But we need to know, What did people feel about this event? Was it engaging? So, are you going to tell somebody about it? Within the next 8 weeks, how likely on a scale of 1 to 10 are you to come back? Remember, we're looking for 9 or 10 so that the promoters, 7 or 8 is fine, okay, but we've got to get up the passive. And then 1 to 6, they're probably going to be speaking negatively about it. The final question, and this is the zinger, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to invite a friend from work to the next event within the next quarter? Anything less than a 9 isn't going to be good enough. We want people to feel this was so engaging that it's worth sharing with someone else so that they will come too. Think about the best restaurant you've been to in the last 2 months. Did you tell someone about it? Probably. Are you going to go back? You're probably thinking about it right now. Are you going to tell someone else to come or with you or to go themselves? Absolutely. And that's how the promoter score works. We want to know employees were engaged in a positive way. The final quadrant in the 4 factors has to do with the results of the program. This is where we actually answer the question we started with. Was it worth it? We look at it 3 ways, 3 points of view. The point of view of the community, the point of view of the company, and the point of view of the employee. To do this, we build something called a logic model, or a theory of change. This particular one was developed by the Kellogg Foundation, and you can find a link to it and great resources on their site. You'll see that there are 5 parts. Number 1 are resources and activities. This is kind of our planned work or our inputs. We have access to these resources and we can follow through on these activities. We should produce, number 3, these outputs. This many hours, this many employees, this many walls painted. Those are our outputs. And that's typically where an employee volunteering program stops. But to really answer the question, was this worth it? We've got to go a bit further. We've got to look at number 4, and outcomes. If we create these outputs, will these outcomes occur? If we deliver the outputs, the numbers that we intend, will our participants benefit in these ways? And finally, if our participants benefit in these ways, what are the impacts, the changes to systems and organizations that will happen over a longer period of time? This is where the world really is affected by our employee volunteering, by any type of volunteering, by any type of community investment. We understand the resources, the activities, we achieve these outputs, we benefit in these ways, and the world is better by these impacts. So let me give you an example. Let's say we have a shovel company. We make shovels, that's our resource, and we happen to be very good at digging ditches. That's our planned activity. We decide we're going to go overseas to do it, for whatever reason, and we're going to go to Kibera. It's a large slum in Nairobi, one of the world's largest slums. And we're going to go to Nairobi and we're going to dig a bunch of ditches in Nairobi. So we all hop on the plane and we go there, and our outputs, we achieve it spectacularly. 500 employees, 500 hours, 500 shovels, 500 ditches. And we report on that in our CSR report. That's a typical employee volunteering program. And it doesn't tell us very much other than we achieve the outputs based on our activities and our resources. But to really tell a story, we need to go further. To really answer the question, was it worth it? We need to be able to talk about outcomes and impacts. So what I didn't tell you is that in Kibera, they have a lot of waterborne disease because they use something called a flying toilet. A flying toilet is when you use a plastic shopping bag to do your business in. I'm sorry if that doesn't translate for you, but you do your business in it, you tie it up, and you throw it into the air. It's not a very sanitary way to deal with human waste, but that's what happens. And so a lot of water in that area, as you can imagine, has problems. So we decide we're going to dig a series of ditches, and we put in those ditches a makeshift sewer system, and we try to deal with some of this human waste issue, a sewage system. And that's great. That's an outcome. Our participants benefit from being able to give to the community, which benefits from having a sewage system. But it doesn't tell us how the world is different yet. You see, because if children don't die of diseases, they live. Mothers don't get sick, they can look after the children. Dads don't get sick, they can continue to go to work. Children go to school, they don't die, they are able to finish their education, and eventually over time, we are able to affect the poverty cycle by helping people break out of it by fixing one part of a big problem. Now, this is a simplistic illustration, I understand that. But I'm trying to show how we can go from shovels, ditch digging, and ditches to some outcomes where we have a sewage system, to impacts where we can break the poverty cycle. That's a far more compelling story, and that does answer the question, was it worth it? That's the kind of insight that we need to work towards in our employee volunteering programs. And that's the story that we need to tell people when we're inviting people to participate in our employee volunteering systems or programs. It's not, come and help me dig a ditch. It's come and help me break the poverty cycle. So, was it all worth it? Yes. If you can speak to the 4 factors and understand if you have the systems, competencies in place, then you're able to answer the question, was it all worth it? Because you're able to get to that question. The 4 factors are interrelated and help guide users to the right questions. Almost every program failure can be traced back to capacity issues. And the most important indicator of engagement is sharing. The logic model, we spent some time with it, but that's because the best programs measure outcomes and impacts, not just outputs. Starting with impacts in mind, help guide program decision-making throughout the 4 factors themselves. And the logic model should be applied to the 3 beneficiary groups, the company, the community, and the employee. Don't leave out the employee, especially since we're talking about employee volunteering. And that is how we measure impact and answer the question, was it worth it?